Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest, Tracy Taris, overcame a childhood of fear, anxiety and self-doubt to become a licensed marriage and relationship therapist, speaker and an author of Many Voices, One Truth. She works extensively now with families in crisis, including coaching parents with parenting issues. Tracy has over 10 years of experience specialising in individual, couples and family therapy. She helps clients who need empowerment due to feelings and beliefs that their life is not within their own control, or due to overall feelings of not being good enough or worthy. She integrates complementary methodologies and techniques to offer a highly personalised approach tailored to each client. Tracy holds a master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy, a bachelor's in journalism with an emphasis in broadcasting, and she is an active member of the Californian Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, and, if all that wasn't enough, the American Association of Christian Counselors. Please welcome Tracy Taris to the Strong, Single and Human podcast. Hi, Tracy Taris. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Hi, Clara. How are you?
I'm fine. So
thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on board. It's been a bit of a chopping and changing of dates to get you on here, but that's okay. That's fine. So look, I've given a brief synopsis about your history, but it'd be great to hear it from you and to understand why you wrote the book, Many Voices, One Truth. So I'm going to hand over to you and let you do the talking.
Thank you. All right, thank you. And thanks again for having me here. So to your audience, my name is Tracy Taris, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the beautiful state of California in the United States. And I operate a private practice, a group private practice, where we provide family counseling, individual counseling, couples, teens, and children from time to time. And so people come here for psychotherapy to work on whatever is going on in their lives so they can remove the barriers and have the life that they've always wanted to have. We provide in-person counseling, which means they come here to our office to see me or one of the other counselors, and telehealth, which means it's kind of like Zoom where you meet online.
Yeah,
I am a CBT therapist, and so are many of the therapists here, and that means cognitive behavioral therapists. So cognitions have to do with your mind and how your thoughts work. Behaviors have to do with the behaviors you are choosing as a result of those cognitions. And the T part is therapy. Like, we help you navigate, what you're doing in your life, what's showing up in your life, how you're thinking about your life, and the way that is all playing out within yourself and within your relationships. And we help you to figure out what you want to do about that so that you can have a healthier existence within yourself and with your relationships. I do a little bit of coaching depending on what's going on with the person with regards to moving forward. Like, the difference between therapy is people come into therapy because whatever is going on for them right now isn't working, and it's getting in the way, like their way of showing up in life or their relationships are getting in the way of them feeling good in their life and maybe feeling good about what they are accomplishing or are not able to accomplish. And so for therapy, we look at what's going on now and how the past played a part and how your thinking plays a part. For coaching, we look more at where you want to go in life and how what you are doing now currently is impacting where you want to go. And so because I am a CBT therapist, one of the reasons I wrote the book is in my line of work, I noticed that there are different broadcast stations, if you will, that people will tune into in their head. And I wrote the book from a Christian perspective. So the voices that I outline in the book are voices of self, and self can be either positive or negative. Voices of Satan, that's always negative, although it can sometimes show up as trickily positive. And then society is what you're tuning into out there in the world, whether it's media, social media, news media, the things you're reading, and then Savior. And Savior is where you come from, the person that created you and, breathe life into you, if you will. But even if your listeners are not of the Christian persuasion or any faith-based, you can still think about those voices from the standpoint of what is uplifting and building me up and what is true. And then from the standpoint of what is negative and pulling me down. Society can be both positive or negative, but society in and of itself is not necessarily positive or negative. It's how you're thinking about it. So like because there's a lot of people out there on social media doing wonderful things and providing
Definitely.
really good information, right? But if you consume that and you use it for your good, you use it to better your life and your situation, whatever your situation is, then that's great. But if you're using it to compare and pull yourself down and think negatively about what you're seeing, or if you consume things that are negative, then the society voice in your head is not one that's, if you listen to it, it's not going to take you where you want to go.
And it's perpetuating, isn't it? Because of the algorithms, if you look at negative information, the algorithms then feed you negative information. And it's almost like the algorithms within social media are actually feeding your downward spiral as such. That's where, so if you're at the top of a drain, as it were, it keeps feeding you the water to then drag you down that drain into the depths of the sewers. I don't know where that came from this morning. I don't know what I've been eating, but and then if you're watching good, uplifting, positive stuff, then the algorithms will send you more of that, right? Depending on what you like, click and go from there, which should then, hopefully focus you on positive building yourself up and making your world a bit positive.
The algorithm works much like your brain. Like if you are constantly thinking negative thoughts, then your mind will give up negative things to think about. If you're constantly thinking about positive and energetic and where you want to go, then your mind will conceptualize those things and just feed you more. I really hope that people are becoming more and more educated with regards to how social media works. Like I talk about that in the book, in the society chapter, and how oftentimes we'll read something online and we'll think, how can this person see this way? Yeah. And how could they not see it my way? And my answer is they can't see it your way because of the algorithm that they're linked into. It's only going to show them the exact stuff that they're used to seeing, just like you can't see it their way because the algorithm that you're linked into is only going to pull up for you. It'd be interesting if you had the kind of money to get 2 laptops and, come from one side of the spectrum and then the other, you'd be surprised by how different your feed is and how different whatever you Google, it'll show you what you already believe.
Yeah. No, it's frightening, isn't it? Really frightening.
Yes.
Yeah. And so why the book though? So what was the turning point for you that you went, I've got to put this down on paper? Because we all think that we've got a book in us, but not many of us write it. So what was your turning point?
Yeah. Well, for this particular book, I've always wanted to be a writer, but I've never taken time to sit down and write. The turning point for me was one major one, and then like a B turning point is I recognize that I'll start with the B. I recognize that most of my clients, they all think along these lines. Like there's these voices that compete for all of our attention on a consistent basis. But the catalyst for the book was I'm an older sister. I'm the oldest sister of 6 girls. So I have 5 sisters. And so one of my baby sisters had a stroke. And she was in her late 30s. I think she was 37 years old. And so she was living, we're all from Louisiana. She was living in Texas. One of us was living in Ohio, and 4 of us were living here and in California. And so the 4 of us flew to Texas to try to help her. And because I'm a marriage and family therapist, I've often worked with case managers, and case managers are people that, like, I help people with their mental and their mental and emotional health, and case managers help them with the things in life that they need, like jobs and, community services and stuff like that. So because I'd worked with case managers, I knew I would have to help my sister put some community services in place. Like I had to help her file for disability because she wasn't going to be able to go back to work right away. And so I was standing in all these lines and just hustling, trying to make it happen for her. And I just started feeling overwhelming feeling. And I started feeling sad and then I started feeling like I wanted to go home, come back to California to my husband and kids. And of course I felt guilty because I thought I should want to be here helping my sister. How dare I, want to escape and get back to my little family, my own family, and not stay here and help my sister. So of course, then I started having suicidal thoughts. I mean, I was just like all over the place with this.
Well, you're only human. At the end of the day, you're only human.
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't understand why I was having all of these and why it had escalated so quickly to having suicidal thoughts. And so I called a friend of mine who, when she and I first met, we had both just gotten a divorce, and we were both single moms. So we decided to rent this house together, to cut the cost of rent and stuff. Yeah. So she knew a lot about my life and about my story. And she said to me, Tracy, this has nothing to do with what's going on there. This has more to do with what you believe. And she reminded me of how, and so what that did was it reminded me of how my mother had told me when I was little. She traced a line on my palm, and she told me that I was going to die young. Now, I had forgotten all about that, and I had dealt with that in therapy. I no longer really believed that, but I think that my sister having the stroke in her late 30s, that's young. It resurfaced that fear for me. And so that's why I was feeling so overwhelmed. And when I was little, I used to have this aunt that would tell me I was evil and that I was going to burn in hell.
Oh my God.
And so when I had the thought, and she told me that because I've always had a mind of my own. And I was always, like my grandmother used to say, that I've been here before. Like I was always saying things as a kid that was something that an older person would say. So she would always say, I basically had a mind of my own.
That. I have a son like that.
Stand up for myself. And so she, for whatever reason, saw that as evil, So I believed for a long time that, maybe I am evil. Maybe I am going to burn in hell. And so when I had that thought of, I want my husband and I want my kids, I want to get out of here because this is too much, I thought of myself as evil. Yeah. So to answer your question of what was a turning point for this book is, I had to ask myself, well, what do I believe? And as I was thinking about that, like I said, I had already gotten therapy. I had already dealt with that in my faith system. So I no longer thought that I was going to die young. And I no longer believed myself to be evil. Like all of that was behind me. But my sister almost dying young brought that deeper to the surface. And as I started looking at that, I was like, well, what are some of the thoughts I'm listening to on a daily basis? And I realized they're the same as my clients. My clients, there's a form of therapy that we do called object relations. And it's usually children that do this. But if you don't get help as a child, you continue to do it as an adult, where you internalize the caregiver as an object inside yourself. And so that mean, harsh, critical voice that you hear, that can be an aspect of yourself, but it's really your parent. And so we do object relations therapy to free that person from that harsh, critical voice that's on the inside, you know, and then, yeah, so that's how it all came about. Like, I just recognized that we all do this. We all do this on a daily basis. And so I decided to write a book to show people how to disconnect from doing this. How to, you know, there's lots of books out there on mindfulness and meditation, you know, and things like that. And those things are helpful. But I think you have to directly address those thoughts that come into your mind. And so the book is full of interventions or exercises that will help a person identify and differentiate between those different voices, but also how to quiet them, how to turn them off or turn them down, you know, using CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy tools, and prayer tools. Because for years I've gone on prayer retreats, and a prayer retreat for me is going somewhere for a 3-day weekend and sitting in silence and quiet. I might go to workshops. There might be writing workshop where you're looking at like poems, which are the Psalms and things like that, and thinking through what's going on and meditating on scripture and meditating on what you're journaling and things like that. And so I've learned a lot from those retreats. And so some of those practices, and again, you don't have to be a person of faith. It's just practices that are dedicated for you calming your mind and your inner world.
Yes, no. And it's quite, I want to unpack some of that with you, actually, because I know when we were talking previously, we were talking about not feeling good enough and things like that. And it seems as though it's one of the imposter syndrome and things like that. And I know one of the things that I always go through running a podcast, right? I run a podcast and I go, like, people are wanting to come on this podcast. And I'm going, why would you want to come on this, right? But it's like an imposter syndrome because, you know, the podcast gives that good information. I have great people on it like you, right? There's all these positive things, but I go, I feel a bit like an imposter, right? So, and also I know I have gone through in my life not feeling good enough, not being good enough, wanting to prove myself. So this is my therapy session. But I know that there's loads of people, right? We've got, you know, there's celebrities, there's Robbie Williams, there's Pink, there's Michael Jackson to a certain extent. There's various different people who didn't feel good enough at various stages of their lives that it really affected them, right? And so, and I know as a single parent, right, you sit there and you go, I don't feel as though I'm doing a good enough job for my child. Am I, how can I do better? How can, you know, and you just feel as though you're failing a lot of the time and like life gets overwhelming because it's just you at the end of the day and you're the one that the child is relying on. And, you know, they go through different stages and all of these things. And you're then going, oh, I thought I'd mastered this stage and now I'm into the next stage, right? And so I wanted to talk to you about this not feeling good enough because it comes up and I see it on social media, the devil social media, but I see it on social media all the time, right? And I don't know if that's the algorithms throwing me stuff at me, but people just not feeling good enough. And like, can we talk through that? What have you experienced through your practice and stuff like that? And how do we stop? How do we stop not feeling good enough and feel better? Yeah. There's a lot of questions there. So sorry, I've thrown a lot of stuff at you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm used to it. Well, I'll start by saying for you and for your listeners that I want you to adopt the belief that there is nothing on the outside of you that can make you feel or do anything. It's what you are thinking about or how you are thinking of what's going on the outside of you that will cause you to feel a certain way. And out of that feeling, you will choose a behavior to respond or not respond. And so the way out of this is to understand that concept. Like if you find yourself feeling anything, you want to ask yourself, what did I just think about? And what is it attached to? Because whatever it is you just thought about, that is what caused the feeling. It's not the person and it's not the situation, right? There's a little bit of a step even between that. So like there's an event, a situation will happen, or you witness something, and then you have a thought about it. Right before you have the feeling about it, your brain chemistry will release a neurochemical, whether it's cortisol for stress or adrenaline or epinephrine for fear, fight or flight, whether it's serotonin or dopamine because it's something great and, happy or good. And then you're going to have the feeling, right? And so what you have to do is, okay, and then after the feeling, you're going to choose a behavior, and that the intensity of the behavior will depend on the intensity of the feeling. So if you feel angry, it's the difference between deciding to, shut down and shut someone out or cuss them out, or even,
Wow.
maybe get physical depending on the intensity of your anger. So what you have to do is ask yourself, what is the source of that voice? Like, is that my own voice? And your own voice is not always just you. It could have been your mom. It could have been your dad. It could have been a coach or a teacher or somebody that had some kind of prominent influence over you growing up. If you're an adult, it could be stemming from that far back, or it could be social things like a friend's voice that you've internalized. If there's a friend that you're always comparing yourself to, her career always seems on the uptick, and my career always whatever. So you have to, because imposter syndrome is usually coming from one of those voices, telling you you're not good enough, or you're not as good as, or you'll never be, blah, blah, blah. So if you can identify the source of that voice, is it self? Is it something from, and again, self could be all these other people in your life that you've just internalized. And now they're no longer in your life telling you this stuff. You're just you're on autopilot. You're just telling yourself this stuff. Is it, some negative force? Is it something you've seen on social media? Or is it something that's from good, like from above? Like, there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about all good things are from the God of lights above, right? So like evaluating for yourself, thinking through what is the source, and then identifying what was my thought, and then challenging that thought with what is true, either something that's true from your history or something that's true from what you understand life to be like, because sometimes we run on automatic beliefs that we no longer believe. Like we've already changed that belief. Like me with my sister, like I no longer believed that I was going to die young, however, we could sometimes run on the fumes of things that we used to believe if we're triggered by something in the here and now that causes that to float to the top of our consciousness.
And it's easy to go back to those feelings, isn't it? Because they're comfortable, they're what you're used to, et cetera, and therefore they can pop up every now and again, and you have to sit and contemplate, like, okay, where did this come from? Because, like you said, you've dealt with it, so it's then sitting there and going, well, hang on a minute, this isn't true, and dealing with that,
Well, the reason the feelings pop up is because it's what your body has gotten used to. Like your brain and your body work in cahoots to keep homeostasis, whatever is familiar, whatever is comfortable, even if it's not comfortable, it's what's familiar, so it's comfortable. But the thing about that is you can train your body to get used to the good stuff. You can train your body to get used to oxytocin, which is the connection and the bonding chemical. You can train your body to get used to serotonin, which is the happier. It helps your mood. Dopamine, which is the motivation and the connection, the inspiration and things like that. You can train yourself, because cortisol is not bad. Adrenaline is not bad. They're there so that cortisol's job is to help us navigate stress through stressful times. But the problem is, let's say you're working on a 3-month long project. If you're staying stressed out for that whole 3 months, and then you come down and then there's a family issue, and you never, like, if baseline is here,
Yeah.
and you're coming down trying to get to baseline, but then something happens in family and then cortisol gets shot up, and then something happens at work. And so a lot of times people live their lives, they don't ever return to baseline. And that's what the weekends are for. That's what a Sabbath is for. That's what taking days off are for, to give yourself time to return to baseline. But what are people doing when they're not working? They're scrolling. They're on YouTube. They're feeding themselves with all of this media. And it keeps their cortisol and their adrenaline. Like, adrenaline is supposed to give you the energy to either fight your way out of a situation or run, or freeze if that's what you need to do for safety's sake. But if you're just kind of hopped up on cortisol and adrenaline and epinephrine all the time without returning back to baseline, it just makes it harder. Baseline goes like this, and you're just like this all the time. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I forgot that this was audio. So what I'm saying in this is, if baseline is chest level, if you hold your arm perpendicular to your chest, and then your cortisol shoots up past your head, and then you come down to about your head, but never down to baseline, which is your chest. You just stay up, you're above water, like you're underwater all the time with cortisol and all of the stress chemicals,
Yeah. And I know before I had children or a child, and my stress levels were like that all the time. Working, contracting, you just did what you did, basically.
And there are seasons in life where that's the case, like motherhood, especially if you have your kids like all in a row, then you're not sleeping for 5 years. You know what I mean?
So how do we stop this not feeling good enough? And I don't know whether we can stop it or not, right? But it is one of the things. But how do we stop our children from feeling it? That's my concern, is how do we pass that on? So I can't alter what's happened to me in the past and things like that, right? So I can only look at present now and look at the feelings that I experience now and stuff like that. And I have to say that my feelings of not being good enough and things like that do rear up every now and then, but they aren't a constant thing that sits there on my shoulder, as it were, that I need to think about, right? Because I've told myself, and exactly what you have said, right? And it takes a long time to work through all of those things and go, no, hang on a minute. 1 in 4 billion chance of you being here. You are an awesome human being and all of these things, right? But then how do we make sure that those are feelings of inadequacy or whatever, don't get transposed to our children? We don't osmosisly like give it to our children. How can we stop that?
You have to start with you. And so let me answer the question is, how do you stop with the, as an adult, stop with the imposter syndrome and the I'm not good enough? You have to start with yourself with that. And the way you do it is, when you're feeling that, you have to ask yourself, what was I thinking before I started feeling this heaviness in my chest or in my stomach, and things like that. And that's another thing. It's like, it depends on where you feel it. If you feel it in your heart, then that's grief. If you feel it in your stomach, in the pit of your stomach, that's the seat of the soul. That's yourself. Usually that's shame. And that's like, you think that's when we think something's inherently wrong with us as a person. So if you feel it in your heart, talk with a therapist about it, or journal on grief. Like, what grief in my life have I not dissolved? What grief in my life have I not work through? Am I filled with grief because I was told these things about myself? And so then you have to figure out, what are the things I believe about myself, and break those beliefs. Because you're told something as a child, or you experience something and you believe it, you take it in and then you agree with it. It becomes a belief, and then becomes a stronghold, which is really hard to break. But you can, by every time you interrupt what you're thinking and ask yourself, what am I thinking? So my thought was, I'm such a loser. And so that you tell yourself that that's not true. That is not true. There's many things I've wanted. And you actually name the things that you've been able to do, raising your beautiful children, finishing whatever degrees. And it's not like you're constantly patting yourself on the back. You have to identify what that thought is, and then you challenge it with what is the truth, right? Like there's people that I know that have all kinds of degrees on their wall, and they still think of themselves as a fraud. They still think of themselves as dumb or idiots, because that's what was drilled. And they made that agreement as a child, and no amount of degrees is going to change that. The only thing that's going to change that is what you believe about yourself and how you think about yourself.
Yeah.
And then for your children, it depends on your parenting style. If you have a parenting style where your children are free and open to come and have conversations with you, and they know that what they think and feel matter to you, then the way you handle that with your children is the same way. You ask them, well, what were you thinking about that before you started feeling that? And then you challenge it with the truth. Like you can, and with children, if you just tell them, oh no, you're great, you're an A student, they're going to think you have to say that because you're their mom. So you ask them questions like, well, that report that you got on that science project, what was that again? What grade did you get on that? And we have A, B, C, D, and F here. So you got an A on that. So if you were like an idiot, or if you were dumb with regards to, or if you didn't do that correctly, would they have given you that? How do you think you got that? And make them talk about it, because you want them, because they have to change their minds. One of the reasons it doesn't work for us to tell them they're great is because it's their mind. They have to change their own mind. This was what I was going to say,
because this is the thing, right? I find that everyone's going, oh, you're awesome, you're, oh, well done, well done, and all of this stuff, right? And I go, is that, like, I don't feel as though that is actually helping our children, right? That's just going, they're awesome all the time, right?
You have to help them find the evidence, find the evidence to the contrary, and help them to see it themselves, and don't worry about them becoming conceited. Like, there's so many parents that will shoot their kids down because they don't want them to be conceited. But conceit and good self-esteem, a good assessment of yourself, is not the same thing. Like good self-esteem, like the definition of self-esteem is really your belief in your ability to accomplish what you set out to do. That's all that is.
Yeah.
It's self-esteem has nothing to do with, oh, I'm the prettiest girl on the block, or I have the best hair ever, or I have the most gorgeous. That's conceit. Yeah. Like, self-esteem is what you think about your ability, how you esteem yourself and your ability to accomplish what you set out to accomplish.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I suppose the conceit comes from telling your child they're awesome, they're gorgeous, they're this, that, and the other all the time, that they then go, oh, I'm gorgeous then, or I'm like, I don't know, but like...
Some kids won't believe that, like, especially if they're experiencing something different out in the world, they won't believe that. Some kids will, if what you're saying is matching what's out in the world. But, there are other forces too. Like, there are other forces, that's based in your child's experience that will tell them otherwise, and have them thinking that.
But also all of that, to my mind, if you're telling them they're awesome and great and all of that stuff all the time, right, puts extra pressure on them as well, right? Because what if they fail?
It can. And it can, or if they don't agree with it, it can put extra pressure on it. Just tell them the truth. Like, if they did a project and it was mediocre, it's okay to ask them, do you think that was your best? Do you because they'll tell you, they'll say, I kind of threw that together, or I could have put more effort. But you explore with them with questions. Like, questions is the best.
That was what I was going to say, right? At the end of the day, like, it sounds to me, with a lot of the things that you're saying, it's actually about getting them to reframe back to you, or to talk to you and tell you how they're feeling, what's going on, finding the evidence to be able to say, like if they say, oh, I'm a bad child or whatever, then to say, well, what makes you say you're a bad child? And these are all the good things, or, that you do? What are the good things that you do, etc.? Sorry, I'm now trying to change these round into questions. So
yeah, name some. Like name some actual things that they did. If they're having a hard time, like, no, I'm nothing. And like you might have to get the ball rolling by having evidence and show them how to look for evidence for themselves.
So another thing that was mentioned was good child syndrome, right? What's good child syndrome?
It depends on the child. Like the child, that it depends on, like, what is the child's role in the family. Like if the child feels the need to take on the role of, okay, I can't have any problems or any negative because my siblings are so off the rails, or my sibling, or if there's like, a person in the family that uses up a lot of the parents' energy and time and resources of money and things like that. Sometimes one of the children in the family will decide that they can't have anything bad or negative because, they don't want to be,
it takes away from everyone else.
A problem because because the family, even if there isn't another sibling that's doing it, like if the family dynamic itself, there's always something going on. Like if dad's always losing his job, or if mom's an alcoholic, or there's some dynamic in the family that the child feels like he or she has to overcompensate to make things a little bit more balanced in the home.
Yeah.
And it's just anxiety. It causes a lot of anxiety for the person.
Yeah. And so the thing is, like, because I'm the reason I asked that question is because I feel as though with single parent families as such, and not all of them, and let's not paint every single one, but with single parent families, you do find that you get a child who is dealing with good child syndrome as such, because if mom's out working or dad's out working and they're doing two jobs or whatever, and they sort of get lumbered with looking after the other children, or just having to grow up a little bit quicker and deal with the single parent situation, especially if you're in a situation where you're not sharing the children across two parents. How do you deal with that as a single parent? How do you stop your child from going into that good child syndrome? Because it might be that you don't want, you don't want to actually go down that avenue, but they just take on that responsibility.
Well, you'd have to be able to recognize it first, because if you're a single parent, and I did a stint as a single parent. I was a single parent 5 years in between my divorce and then getting remarried. And when you're a single parent, everything is on your shoulder. I was kind of fortunate in that, because I have so many sisters and cousins, and my daughter was kind of a village child. So I relied heavily, but sometimes no one was available, and it was all on me. And so when it is all on you and you're getting respite because that child is taken over on something, you might not even notice it. You might not even notice that the child has taken on too much, because a lot of times we only notice when something is wrong. You might not notice it until it starts to impact the child in a negative way. But when you do, that's when you start the communication. You ask the question and you ask him or her, do you feel like this is your responsibility? And then see what they say, like listen to what it is they're saying, and then relieve them of it. Like, I really appreciate you, honey, for helping me out with this, but this is my responsibility. This is something that I have to do. Like, so for example, when my daughter got accepted into university, she was all excited, and we were excited because it was the same university I had gone to.
Wow.
And it's a really hard university to get into.
Yeah.
And so, but one day I saw her looking at the computer screen, and she was just fretting, just stressing out, and she had all this worry on her face. And I was asking her, what's wrong? What's up? And she couldn't articulate it. So I looked at the screen and I said, are you worried about where you're going to live? Because she was a transfer student. She had done the first part of her education at the community college. And then she was transferring, to university for her major, which was 3 hours away. So she wasn't going to be able to live home. And so she was stressing out. She was, I don't know how I'm going to be able to go to a school as hard, as difficult as, Cal Poly, and work. I was like, that's not for you to worry about. That's for, you mean you're looking, how are you going to find a place to live and work and pay for it? I'm like, that's my and your dad's and your stepdad's responsibility. You don't have to worry about that at all, and so just relieve them of it. Like, find out what's going on in their little hearts and in their minds, and then, tell them the truth of, this is for me or for this person to deal with, not you.
Yeah. God love her though, that she was gonna go and live and pay for herself and be independent.
Right.
And
you have 4 full-time working parents between the 4. I mean, because her dad's, girlfriend is her stepmom, and my husband is her stepdad. I'm like, between the 4 of us, we can get some kids.
Yeah, no, shame. But that's so good. That's so good. So, if somebody wants to get in contact with you and talk to you, or find your book, how do they contact you? Is your book on all the normal online places as such, Amazon and stuff?
Yes, it's mostly on Amazon, but it's also on Barnes and Noble and a lot of other Goodreads, a lot of other places like that. And if you want to get in contact with me for therapy services, my website is healingthemindandspirit.com. And you could also, if you want to join my email list, and every now and then I'll send you emails, you can join at TracyTaris.com. It's TracyTaris. I'll have Emily send you my link tree with all of those.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'm also on Instagram at Healing the Mind and Spirit and at Tracy Taris. And I'm on Twitter. So if you just Google my name, you'll see all of those.
You'll find them all.
Places.
Find them all. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, look, I've got one final question for you. What piece of advice have you been given that you still use today?
Oh my. What's one piece of advice that I've been given that I still use today? Well, I'll give you 2. For my practice, know who you can't work with. What kinds of clients you're not going to be good for.
Okay.
And for me, it's domestic violence, like men who beat up their wives or, hurt their children. I just wouldn't be good. And so, like, if I get a call like that, I refer out, because there are people that are better equipped to help someone stop doing that. And so I know that I'm not that person. And then the other piece of advice was start the day every day with prayer. And over time, I've added meditation because of all the brain and body benefits. And so there isn't a day that, even when I'm on vacation, like, I start, attending to my spirit. And then I take care of my body with exercise or coffee. And then I take care of my mind by journaling but that first hour in the morning is for my body and spirit.
Yeah.
My hour.
And I hope you don't mind me asking, but, like, what do you pray about? Is it things that you're grateful for, that you just say thanks for, or like what do you do?
I'm 54 years old, and I've been praying for a long time now. So my prayers, they used to be asking God for things like working in the life of this person, that person, protect my children, protect my family, help me to get this job or that job and stuff like that. And now I mostly pray for the world. I pray for our country. I still pray for my children, that people would find the love of God, like people would have a connection and take care of their spirit and not just be so caught up with their minds or so caught up with the material things of life, that we can all become, the world can be a great place to live, where people love each other and love not just their own families, but starting with their families, but for peace and for people to find a way to God and things like that.
Well, I think you do a fantastic job. Sorry, say that again.
I said, I still ask for stuff.
Oh. Yeah, no, well, that's fair enough. That's okay. You can put it out there in the world. That's fine. It's not a bad thing. I think you do a fantastic job, because I think we need to have more people like you in the world so that we can understand ourselves, and, understand other people so that we can have more of that love and connection and things like that. Because I think when we disconnect with ourselves, we disconnect with other people. We don't understand what they're going through and, all of the pressures that they might be dealing with on a daily basis. Yeah. And we need a bit more human being love. Doesn't matter what country you come from, although at the moment we've got the Women's World Cup here, so it does here at the minute. But but it doesn't matter what country you come from, whether you're male, female, alien, whatever. At the end of the day, just understand, give each other, and be nice to each other, and hopefully we can survive a bit longer on this spinning planet that we're on and move forward. Yeah. But so look, I'm going to let you get on with your day. I'm going to get on with my day because it's the morning for me. And thank you again. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'll come back anytime. I'm working on my second book, so I'll let you know when I'm shopping that around and maybe I can come back.
No, that's awesome. We would have you back at like a shot. No, that's great. No, let me know when you're going to publish your second book and we'll have you back. We'll interview you about the second book. All good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.